afternoon to all of you. Thanks for joining us here on The Big Story. I'm Afrida Rahman Ali. We are looking at the crisis brewing over the island of Lakshadweep. Now remember, this is a new crisis. In the latest that we are reporting today, 8 leaders from BJP's Yuva Morcha have quit in the last 2 days, while several others have indicated that they might also follow suit. Just to put our viewers in perspective of this issue, Lakshadweep is directly ruled by the centre through an administrator, Praful Patel, who's the administrator for Union Territory of Dadra and Nagar Haveli and Daman Diu, was given the additional charge of Lakshadweep following the demise of Dineshwar Sharma in December last year. So Patel has now introduced contentious regulations, including the draft Lakshadweep Development Authority Regulation 2021 that gives powers to the administrator to remove or relocate islanders from their property for town planning or development activity. That has created a furore among the local residents of the island. Also, under the Prevention of Anti-Social Activities Act, or the PASA, which was introduced in January 2021, a person can be detained without any public disclosure for up to a year. As per another notification, a panchayat member with more than 2 children will be disqualified. So therefore, questions of overreach of the administrator now arising in this entire case. Mr. Patel has proposed new measures that have really not gone down well with the islanders, and they allege that these measures are an intrusion and an imposition on their lifestyle, on their culture and heritage. Beef, for instance, is banned, with the new regulation coming in to control cow slaughter, whereas alcohol shops are being allowed to operate. Remember, Lakshadweep is a Muslim-majority island, with Malayalam being the dominant language. So questions we are asking today: is this an administrative overreach or a communal agenda? Why the people of Lakshadweep were never taken into confidence? Can administrative reforms of this nature threaten the inherent culture and heritage of Lakshadweep? Let me introduce my guests this afternoon. Joining me, Dr. Anshul Avijit, National Spokesperson of the Congress, and Tuhin Sinha, Spokesperson of the BJP. Coming to you first, Anshul, I want you to actually lay out for us what the outrage is all about. And let's take each of these things, in order of importance. First, talking about PASA, Prevention of Anti-Social Activities Act. Anshul, why is it such a problem? I mean, there is always an argument that Lakshadweep is precariously and strategically located. There are concerns around narcotics trade. There are concerns around terror outfits operating out of here. If there are more stringent laws made for the interest of national security, why is that a problem, Anshul?
No, that is not the point. We're clearly missing the point. The point is that the BJP leaves a trail of destruction and of devastation wherever it goes, whatever it touches. We're not even talking about the pandemic here. We're talking about a nightmare which is worse than the worst cyclone. And that is whatever it has done in the last 7 years has had the same kind of effect. Lakshadweep now is that hapless, unfortunate island where the BJP has now set its eyes on, where the BJP is now targeted. Now, this administrator now who's in charge of the BJP, he has clear links with, of course, the Bharatiya Janata Party, clear ideological links, and it is their ideological agenda that he's implementing in the state. He was an MOS home during the time the current Prime Minister was the CM of that state. He has links with the RSS, and we know his ideological ground plan and playbook as well. I mean, there can be no, Frida, rational justification for the kind of sweeping changes that have come about in the state. In fact, as you mentioned already, a lot of BJP senior leadership of the state itself, like the General Secretary, Mr. Mohammed Qasim, has said that there was no consultative process, there was no consultative mechanism in which the people, elected representatives of the people, were consulted while making these changes. I mean, of course, the centre has that executive authority, but just like in the case of CAA, just like in the case of mining laws, just like in the case of labour laws and the newly instituted new IT laws, I mean, there is no consultative mechanism. The farm laws, another blazing example where there is no consultation, no consensus between everyone. This is a draconian government. This is a government that does not allow any form of dissent. And some of the rules that you've laid out, including this kind of what is called as the Gunda Act over there, where the crime rate is so low is actually to scuttle any form of defense, just like the new IT law. I mean, it's exactly the same in a different form. And not only that, the environmental laws are being subverted, property is being taken away, there is interference in diet, in the cultural habits of the people over there, the cultural links that
Let
exist
me get
between
Tuin to respond to some of the points you made already, and we'll take each of these issues point by point. We'll come to the issue of the land acquisition part as well and the environmental concerns. But first, Tuin, respond to what Anshul is saying, that there's an ideological game plan at play, sweeping changes made, no consultative process. It looks like a draconian order at the first instance with the kind of measures that have been announced by Mr. Patel. Tuin.
Well, time has come a full circle for the Congress party, because the last time the Congress and the Maldives, the Congress and Lakshadweep put together in the national media was in 1987 because of a extravagant holiday of the then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, which had blocked the island for a good 1 week from common tourists. And during that period, they actually went to an island where they consumed liquor. Now, the same Congress party, 35 years later, is against...
What are you talking about? Tuhin, come on. Come on, Tuhin, you're going back so many years. I mean, I respect you, but going back there, you're not even answering the question.
No, I'll answer it better. But
I have to... No, let him finish, Anshul. Let him put his argument forward first. Yes.
I have to point out the irony that 35 years later, the present-day Congress wants to cater to a radicalized audience. Now, coming to the subject point by point, let me rebut all the accusations. The only act which has come into effect as of today is the Anti-Social Activities Regulation Bill 2021, or the Gunda Act. Now, what was the reason for it? There are two reasons. The earthing of illegal vessels was a massive problem. Now, I have been to Lakshadweep. You may not have been to Lakshadweep. The islands are so separate and so far off from each other. Minicoy, which is the southmost tip, is a good 400 kilometers south of Kochi, whereas from the northern tip of Maldives, it is barely 120 kilometers away. So given the security challenges, we had to curb these illegal practices. At the same time, only in March this year...
Forget the Congress. We are making a very simple point here. Why were the people of Lakshadweep not consulted? Why are your own party leaders angry? Answer that part, please.
Narrative, coming to the second point, let me address each of these issues. Now, the panchayat election rules, while you talk about the population control thing, an equally important component of that panchayat election proposed rules is to, ensure that 50% of reservation is given to women. Now, would you have a problem with that? Only the radicalized elements have a problem with, this entire propaganda or narrative that we don't consult people. You want the population to remain retrograde. You want the population to remain radicalized. Who would have a problem with 50% of the panchayat seats being reserved for women? You don't talk about that. Yes, a part of that also has to do with population control, but isn't that a part of the, proposed in Assam also? Your state, isn't that population bill coming in force in Assam also? So I think, the clear attempt...
No, Tuhin, all that is fine. We are questioning, this is a democracy. You have not employed a consultative process. And when you do that, it looks like an imposition, which is why we are asking this question. Is this an overreach of the government extending its powers, imposing certain things, because the local residents are angry? It's not the Congress party, it's the local population that is up in arms against these laws. In fact, your own party leaders, the BJP Yuva Morcha leaders, are stepping down. Tuhin, why are they angry? Because they are feeling threatened in some way or the other, and you have not taken them into confidence, and you have not taken the stakeholders into confidence, and this is a repeated pattern in many of the decisions of the BJP at the center as well.
That barring the Gunda Act, the other bills have been sent for feedback. That they are in a draft form, they have not been implemented. But yes, isn't this a practice that every time we want to go in for reforms, and reforms coming in over here, because Lakshadweep has immense tourist potential. People, throng to Maldives. They allow Maldives to earn all the revenues while depriving the Lakshadweep population of a better future. So I think this is primarily the reason why...
Okay, so...
And these are
So,
apart from the
Anshul, what Dwayne is also trying to say, that this is a draft legislation. So much of this is under consideration even now. So for your leaders like Rahul Gandhi to say ignorant bigots in power destroying Lakshadweep, Priyanka Gandhi saying BJP has no business to impose arbitrary restrictions. So do you think that's taking a very extreme position? Don't you think it's an extreme position when this process is still on? It's a draft legislation, which means there can be further consultations on it.
Frida, it is the BJP that takes extreme positions. If you notice their habit, if you notice their bill passing without any consultation, including the farmers'
I
bill,
wanted you to
that was
respond to
bulldozed.
that.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
Frida?
carry on.
Yeah, no. What I'm saying is the BJP is taking extreme positions, and it has done that throughout by exercising its executive authority. Now, my good friend Tuhin over here has the unenviable task of defending the undefensible. I do not know how he can possibly defend the fact that panchayat election aspirants can only contest if you have two children. I mean, it's completely anti-democratic. It is outrageous. In no way can it be defended in any kind of rational system of assessment over here. I mean, we've done away with all this. This does not exist in our polity anymore. If you have such a law, you have all kinds of other laws which violate in the name of tourism, taking away of land, cutting down on trees, expansion of roads, completely arbitrary, completely unilateral. And the Gunta Act, let me tell you that, it has one of the lowest crime rates in this country, Lakshadweep. The jails are virtually lying empty, and you want to have a Gunda Act. There is no other motive behind this. It is essentially a camouflage for scuttling down on any form of dissent in this country, like anywhere else. I mean, the new IT laws do exactly the same thing. These are tactics of intimidation. Here you have the executive power because it's under the union government, and therefore you appointed an administrator. By the way, the first time an ideological administrator has been appointed is not a career bureaucrat. It is, and for a specific purpose, to implement these changes, to make ideological sweeping changes in a part of the country which hasn't seen the effect of the BJP so far. So it's a malicious propaganda by the BJP. You know, after a while, no part of this country will be left without a fire burning there. And there will be nobody to douse that fire. And these people, there will be fires everywhere. Every territory of this country will be colonized by the BJP itself. I mean, it's a perfect mimicry of the colonial state, where you come and colonize your own territory, exploit
Right,
it
now
for your
let's
own
stick to the points that this
and
new
commercial
draft
purpose.
legislation is making. We're not going to get alarmist immediately. What I'm going to ask you, Tuhin, though, is that this is provocative, isn't it? I mean, on one hand, you have a beef ban, there's an Animal Preservation Act, and then there's a restriction on cow slaughter. Now that becomes suspect in a Muslim-majority island where, again, you are allowing alcohol shops, liquor shops to operate. So these things clubbed together with the other development issues, why don't you keep these issues aside? Why is everything clubbed together, which is giving a lot of ammunition? And it's not just the Congress. Kerala CM has also said that there is a communal agenda at play, some people imposing fringe ideology over the island. Sharad Pawar is also echoing a similar sentiment. So you may demonize the Congress, but then there are other parties, also everyone literally saying the same thing.
I'm just going to come to it in a minute. Let me just counter, something incorrect which had been sent by my friend Anshul. When it comes to the population bill or the reform proposed over there, please read it clearly. It clearly does not include people who already have more than 2 children, but going ahead from here, if these reforms get implemented, henceforth, anybody desirous of contesting the panchayat elections would probably take the extra precaution of not going in for more than 2 children. This is the most reformist thing that you can imagine. How is it provocative? Now, coming to your second point, Afrida, about the beef ban. Now, this is something which
is an intrusion into one's personal life, isn't it? For anybody, for that matter.
Democratic. I mean, how can you even justify it even for a minute?
And there are times where you need to interfere with personal choices. Can you allow people to have 7 or 8 children in this today's day and age? Isn't that impacting the country's education in the future? So there are certain things where the government needs to get involved. purely for the sake of the future generations. Now, coming back to beef ban, which was your original question, see, Article 48 of the Constitution gives the right to state governments or to union territories to ensure that. Now, again, it is not something which is final. In 1982, Indira Gandhi had explicitly written to 14 chief ministers asking them to implement beef ban. Mahatma Gandhi had once proposed it. This is not something which is final. It is, it is in a draft or a proposed form in Lakshadweep, and I don't see the reason for such a
All right. Unfortunately, we'll have to leave it at that. There's a Niti Aayog briefing which is coming in. Tuhin and Anshul, I'm afraid I have to wind up here. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.